What if the person you're obsessed with is not your soulmate, but your wound in disguise? What if the butterflies you felt weren't love at all, but your nervous system recognizing a familiar ache? What if the intensity you called passion was only the echo of an old pain waiting to be noticed, not repeated? They told you love is electric, that when it's right you'll feel it in your bones. But no one told you that trauma also lives in the body, that the pull you feel might not be destiny, but history. Carl Jung warned us, what we do not make conscious, we repeat. And in that repetition, we name our patterns fate. But fate is just the past dressed up as the present. You think you love them. But what you love is how they trigger your abandonment, your rejection, your invisibility. You love the high of being seen, and the crash when you're not. You love chasing their attention because it feels just like trying to earn the love you were once denied. You confuse pain with depth and inconsistency with chemistry. But this is not love, this is reenactment. You are not weak, you are not broken. You are simply entangled, caught in a projection so powerful that it blinds you to the truth. You don't love the person. You love the story your wound wrote about them. A story filled with maybes, with hope, with silent suffering. A story that keeps you waiting and giving and shrinking, hoping this time the ending will be different. But what if this is the moment the pattern breaks? What if everything changes the second you realize that you're not craving love? You're craving repair, and that no one else can rewrite your pain until you stop letting it choose your partners? Keep watching. Because what you'll discover next may not just shift your perspective, it might set you free from the very loop that's been calling itself love. There is a moment in every false love story where the illusion begins to crack, not from outside but from within. You start to notice how exhausted you feel after seeing them, how small, how strangely disconnected from yourself. But still, you call it love. Still, you stay. Not because it nourishes you, but because it feels familiar. And familiarity, Jung taught us, is the unconscious speaking in symbols. You were never taught to recognize love. You were taught to recognize tension, to respond to chaos, to feel drawn toward the unavailable, the unpredictable, the emotionally cold, because somewhere in your past, those traits became a blueprint for intimacy. The nervousness, the anxiety, the highs and lows, they feel like home. But not because it's love, because it's a wound you've mistaken for chemistry. Every time they pull away, your heart races, not with love but with fear. Fear of not being enough, fear of being forgotten, fear that the story is ending again. And in that panic, you give more. You try harder. You become quieter, softer, smaller, hoping they'll stay. But they are not your healer. They are your mirror. And mirrors do not love back. They reflect what you refuse to see. Carl Jung spoke of projection, the unconscious act of placing our inner world onto someone else. You see them as magical, special, irreplaceable. But what if what you see is just a part of yourself, exiled and starving, longing to be returned to you? What if you are not chasing them, but chasing the part of you they activate, the part that never felt chosen, the part that still believes love must hurt to be real? You confuse their silence with depth, their distance with mystery, their avoidance with strength. But none of it is real. What you're feeling is not a connection. It's an emotional trap, the thrill of being noticed followed by the collapse of being ignored, the dopamine of attention, the cortisol of neglect. It's not love, it's a biochemical reenactment of your earliest emotional imprints. You tell yourself they're different, that this is special, that the pain means something. But what if the pain is the only thing that feels real, because you've never experienced love without it? You've never learned to trust calm, to embrace stability, to see gentleness as genuine, and so you chase the wound again and again and again, not because you want to, but because you haven't yet remembered that you have a choice. Healing begins the moment you pause and ask, what part of me is seeking this person? Is it your adult self, grounded, aware, whole? Or is it your wounded inner child and desperate to finally feel seen, held, valued? Jung believed that what remains unconscious becomes destiny, and unless you break the pattern consciously, it will continue calling itself fate, and you will continue calling it love. This is not judgment, this is liberation. The moment you see that you're in love with a wound, you create space between stimulus and response. You begin to slow down, to observe your cravings, to stop romanticizing your own suffering. You learn to say, just because I feel drawn to them doesn't mean they're right for me. And that is the beginning of freedom. There will be grief. Grief for the fantasy. Grief for the years spent waiting, hoping, hurting. But behind that grief there is something else. Light. The light of self-recognition, the light of boundaries, the light of learning that love does not require abandonment. That love, real love, will never ask you to betray yourself to feel worthy. And anything that demands your betrayal is not love. It's memory disguised as meaning. And slowly the wound stops choosing. You stop confusing intensity with intimacy. You begin to recognize safety as sacred. You start to see yourself not as unworthy but as healing. And in that healing, you attract not another mirror of your pain, but a witness to your truth. Someone who sees you clearly, because you finally stopped hiding from yourself. And here you are, not at the end of a story, but at the beginning of a remembering. The remembering that love is not supposed to feel like waiting. That real connection does not require sacrifice of your essence. That peace is not boring, it is holy. And what you mistook for passion was often just your nervous system asking for a break. The person you thought you loved, they were never the destination. They were the messenger, the symbol, the trigger that led you back to the part of you that was never properly held. You didn't fall in love with them. You fell in love with the possibility that your pain might finally matter to someone. But now, it matters to you. You begin to see how much of your identity was built around being needed, being available, being chosen. But now your worth no longer lives in someone else's hands. You've stopped begging mirrors for reflections they can't offer. You've begun to recognize yourself, not as an extension of their love, but as the source of your own. And that shift is quiet. It doesn't come with fireworks. It comes in moments, saying no without guilt, staying in when you used to chase, looking in the mirror and no longer needing to shrink. There is power in this quiet, a sacred rebellion against the old story, the one that told you love is earned through suffering. You no longer need to be broken to be interesting. You no longer need to ache to feel alive. You no longer need to chase people who walk away, because you're too busy walking home to yourself. Carl Jung called this process individuation, not becoming someone new, but returning to the self, the one who always existed beneath the projections and the patterns. There is grief, yes, but there is also gratitude. Gratitude for the pain that woke you up, gratitude for the mirror that showed you what you were still carrying, gratitude for the wound that led you back to the wounder, and finally to the healer within. You do not need another apology. You do not need closure. You need to choose yourself in every room, in every silence, in every decision. Because when you do, the wound loses its voice. It no longer chooses who you love, you do. Let this be the moment you stopped chasing what hurts and started listening to what heals. Let this be the breath where you remember that love is not meant to confuse you. It's meant to find you. And to find you, you must become visible to yourself again. If something stirred inside you, even if you can't name it, hold onto that. It's not confusion, it's awakening. It's your psyche whispering, this is the way back, follow it. There is more shadow to face, more truth to reclaim, more love, real love, waiting beyond the wound. If this touched something sacred in you, stay with this channel, not for content, for connection, for conversation, for the quiet revolution of finally loving yourself with the same intensity you gave away. Subscribe as a vow to your own becoming. Share this with someone still chasing ghosts, and return for the next truth. Because healing isn't linear, but it is yours.